Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles.
As we're thinking about Lashon HaRa, there's actually sort of a few different ways that appears. We were just talking about with Nazi and kind of writing false things, actually writing positive things, but false positive things on the website, which is kind of an interesting Lashon HaRa piece of this episode. But the one that I think is sort of more, there's more to unpack and think about was the whole situation with Yifat and, her friend and, perhaps rival, whatever, someone else in the field, right? Where everything that Yifat says is very complimentary. And yet she also knows the way it's going to be heard. Oh yeah, she's great. She's like dominates the ultra-Orthodox, like the Haredi sphere. Like, wait, Haredi? It's like, oh yeah, all the Haredi designers go to her. She, so like everything was complimentary, and yet Yifat clearly sort of knows that this cool, hip, modern Orthodox woman looking for a cool, hip, firm fashion line is not going to want someone who is primarily working in the Haredi sphere, right? So like, and it's interesting that Yifat thinks of that immediately, right? Like just on the spot is like that's her immediate response, and then has to sort of unpack it with her friends. And of course, Ruth's like, yeah, totally fine. Like, that's what you want. So you have to do what you have to do to get it. And Hodaya is just distracted with her story. But I think that whole idea of, and we were talking about this a little bit earlier as we were learning about this idea of kind of avak lashon hara, like the dust or the remnant of lashon hara, like things that aren't actually lashon hara, but sort of are lashon hara. Things that are going to be heard in a certain way, even if you compliment someone, but that compliment is going to lead to someone thinking something negative about that person, right? That is considered avak lashon hara, like the remnant of lashon hara, which is forbidden as well, just like lashon hara. And so seeing sort of Yifat needs to figure out, is this bad? What do I do about this? And then ultimately, ends up taking the job, and we don't know how that part of the story unfurled per se. Yeah. So when you consider that lashon hara, so it seems to not fall under the biblical definition of lashon hara, but certainly rabbinically it's understood to be prohibited. And that's this idea of lashon hara, saying something bad about a person, right, is biblically prohibited. All the stuff that is considered avak lashon hara, like this like secondary lashon hara, isn't necessarily biblically prohibited, but it's definitely understood to be kind of rabbinically prohibited. That that it's going to lead to someone thinking negative thoughts, right? So that's a problem as well.
And just to kind of clarify and make this net a little bit wider, lashon hara is really anything you would say about another person that could lead them to think differently about the person. So it could be true, it could be not true, it could be in front of them, it could be behind their back. Lashon hara is actually a very large category of how we speak. We just think about it as, gossiping about somebody because that's how we learned about it when we were kids, or that's how we most typically talk about it. But really, it's just any kind of speech that might lead you to say something about another person that either isn't true or that they don't know that you're saying, and then kind of snowball effects into something greater.
Right.
Renee has her hand up, and then, yeah.
So I was just curious as to if somebody does lashon hara like she did initially, but then she felt bad and she wanted to go and fix it somehow out of guilt, feeling guilty. Does that, how does that work with the whole idea of the lashon hara? Does it like cancel it out, or she still gets the merit or whatever for having committed lashon hara? Like if you realize after you do something that's not so good, if you realize after and try to fix it or make amends, does that cancel it out?
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess what I would say is, for one thing, there's the question, like lashon hara often hinges somewhat on the question of intent. I think in this case, it's actually pretty clear that Ifat's intent was negative, right? Her intent from the get-go, it wasn't like she said something and then it was like, oh, wait, is this person going to hear that negatively? I think the intent was clearly to try to get
she did recognize, she was like, but wait, I didn't mean it that way. I don't want her to lose her, right? Like she tried, like that very famous Hasidic story that you've all probably heard with the pillow and the feathers and la la la. That was like exactly what was happening in front of us without the actual visual of a pillow. She was like, oh, how do I gobble these words back into my mouth that I've now put out into the world? So yeah, so? I agree. What?
I said, you think so? I'm actually not sure.
So I think so.
She said so. Did she really? I don't know. I think it was like, right, the immediate response, like subconsciously almost, is like jealousy and like, I'm gonna mess this up. And then afterwards she's like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. That's bad. But like in the moment, she just went for it,
I think we're saying the same thing.
Yeah, I guess the difference is like, it sounds almost like what you're saying is like she didn't realize in the moment that this would be a bad thing. And I think she did realize in the moment it would be understood as a bad thing. And then she just realized, like,
I think she recognized in the moment that what she was saying was negative of the person. I don't think that in the moment she recognized that all the words that she was about to say were going to potentially mean that person got fired. I guess that's what I'm getting at, is that she didn't necessarily recognize that her speech was going to lead to negative action as opposed to just being negative speech.
Okay, I guess I'm just not sure if I agree. I think her thought is, I want the job, exactly as Debbie and Steve say. Her thought is, I want the job. They're only going to hire one person for this job. So ultimately, her getting the job means this other person losing the job.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Eileen was going to say something.
I was going to say that I think she had full intent of why she said it and the way she, put it. That she was intending in order to discourage her from hiring the other woman and to hire her instead. I think it was to put the other woman down, and she knew what she was doing. And I think she even knew it more because she had wanted to get advice to approve her what she did, and she knew she was wrong.
Right. You're right. Maybe in the moment it's sort of like that was the immediate reaction, and then she was like, oh, if I had time to think about it, I would have said, I shouldn't do this, but I think in the moment, the intent to me was pretty clear of what she was, what her purpose was to try to, right? She was waiting for this job. Yeah, Lashon HaRa just being competitive. I mean, I think that counts as Lashon HaRa, right? You're saying this so that this person might lose the job so that you can get the job. That is Lashon HaRa. It's also competitive, but it's using tools of Lashon HaRa for competitive purposes, which I think is still considered Lashon HaRa. Right? I mean, and that's when it went through in the Chafetz Chaim, when he talks about the kind of like the rules of Lashon HaRa, one of the things he says is that, it needs to be only, it must be only for benefit. Like, it can't be just something that benefits you and harms another person. It needs to be something that, like, is going to be purely beneficial to the, in this case, to Nitzan, right? If she's saying this thing to Nitzan, if it was really true that, oh, this person would be a bad fit, and it's not for self-serving purposes, but really just looking out for Nitzan's well-being and the well-being of her company, that would be different. But in this case, it's clearly self-serving, so I think it's hard to justify it, halachically. Yeah, I think, was Denise next? Was next. Okay, Denise.
So I feel like there's a big picture perspective of kind of all the petty divisions within the Jewish world, because the irony is, if any one of those Haredi clients finds out that this girl is doing a job for some hip designer in Tel Aviv, like, it's over. All her clients are going to drop her faster than you can say Lashon HaRa. So,
you think so?
Yeah, 1,000%, 10,000%. If somebody does, like, they have like Mishpacha magazine here in the U.S. and Mishpacha family and Mishpacha teen, and then whatever. all these different publications, then God help one of those writers if they appear in the Jewish Journal. Forget it. It's over. You can't dance at two weddings, as they say. And so to me, when I saw it, it was like, yeah, she's clearly doing something kind of corporate underhanded type of thing, but it's only underhanded because of the Mishigas in the Jewish community. It doesn't have to be that way.
That's a whole nother class for a whole other time.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you can talk.
Yeah, I guess I didn't think about that. I mean, so Nitzan's company is, the idea is that it's fashionable, but still sneaks, right? It's sort of intended for modern Orthodox.
No. Because in the frum world where she's doing her work right now, this other photographer or designer, whatever, there's this whole thing about you should be attractive but not attracting, and your sheitel can't be too long because that's sexy. Chabad says yes, the Bora Park says no, and then you shouldn't wear fashions from this year. If you go pick up your kids with your sunglasses up on your head, you can't do that. It's too modern. So no way would that designer be accepted if she was at the other. No way.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because, I could see modern Orthodox people being like, oh, this cool designer, this hip, cool.
Yeah, modern Orthodox, keyword being modern.
Right,
but
you're right. Maybe Haredi people would be like, I'm not getting a thing from this designer who works in the Goyish world.
1,000%. 1,000%.
I think Rabbi Barbara and then, I guess, Michael and then Renee.
Yeah. There we go. Oops, sorry. I think that was my fault. There we go.
No, I got it. It seemed to me, Yifan had all these surahs about, what should she do? Should she talk to Nitzan? Should she not talk to Nitzan? Should she confess to Nitzan? And then when she actually goes there, is it Nitzan or Nitzan? Anyway.
Nitzan, yeah.
Nitzan says something like, she said something about the other designer, and then she says, but of course you wanted the job. And so I sort of got the impression that beyond all the angst that Yifan had, in a way, when she said those things, Nitzan's mind went, okay, well, that could be problematic. It's like what Denise was saying. It could be problematic.
Yeah.
Or, okay, I get it. Or, when she stopped to think about the conversation, maybe she went, oh, maybe she's telling me that because she really wants the job. Mm-hmm. So that's what I was thinking. And I wanted to ask Denise, but now I can't remember. So go ahead. Go ahead. If I think of it, I'll text her.
Michael.
Hi.
Hi.
I want to change the subject a little bit to guess where to our favorite character. How do we, I know it's a small subplot, but nonetheless, how do we judge in this context of Lashon HaRa, Nadi's breaking the news to I forget her name, Crown, that she's fired. Granted, he thought she knew, but she didn't. And I'll leave that for your discussion to the three rabbis.
Rabbi Schatz, any thoughts? Yeah.
So it's funny that you bring that up, Michael, because when Rabbi Pernick texted me 2 days ago to say, we're going to be talking about Lashon HaRa, and I said, okay, fine. I thought that that's actually where he was getting it from. Nice. So I was surprised today when we were talking about Yifat and the job piece. Yeah. I think that Nati is just constantly sticking his foot in his mouth. He just doesn't really realize how to be a social human being most of the time. And so he thought that he was comforting her, and yet he was creating problems. And that's that's just a Nati issue, right? It's just who he is. That's what happens. So is it Lashon Hara? No, because he's telling her something that first of all is about her and is factual. And I guess you could maybe categorize it as Lashon Hara until someone else tells her. I don't really think so. And I would argue that I'm right, but, I don't see it as, I don't see it as being harmful in a Lashon Hara way. It's definitely harmful in a social, emotional way, which we see. And then he doesn't really know what to do afterwards. Like, he doesn't even go after her, which, come on, sir. Like, let's get with the picture here. So I don't know. Maybe Rabbi Pernick has more to say on the topic. I just think that it's very classic Nati to not know how to read a situation, to be like a little bit overly ambitious and want to smooth things over and therefore make problems. But I don't know that we would put it in the category of Lashon Hara, though I'm guessing that because I said it's not in the category of Lashon Hara, Rabbi Pernick will say that it is. So over to Rabbi Pernick.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't think that was Lashon Hara. I think he meant it as something helpful. But I think when he was asked, and this comes to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, when he was asked by his supervisor, hey, what do you think about the clown on our unit? Do you think that this benefits patients? I don't think the well-being of patients was anywhere on his mind when he responded.
Correct. 100%.
I think it was like, yeah, no, I believe in antibiotics. But he does say, like, some people seem to think it helps.
But also, he is worried about being around this woman who I think I'm like now reading into this a little bit, but he's worried about being around a woman that he doesn't really know how to deal with, right? He like clearly has feelings for her. She's told him what to do about it if he wants to do anything. He doesn't know how to take that bait. So they're just kind of like,
well, plus now he's like Mr. Hotshot. Now everyone wants to date him. So
yeah, sure.
It's true,
He's Mr. Hotshot according to a website. He's not Mr. Hotshot. No, but now everyone's calling
to set up dates with him.
Yeah. And then they don't date
if I may, Rabbi, it's already showing that his attempt to be Mr. Hotshot's falling apart very quickly.
Yes, Rabbi Barbara, yeah. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I think that he's recognizing that if other people think he's he became much more egotistical again in this episode than he was last episode.
Right.
Because all of a sudden people were telling him how great he was.
Right. I think he had the huge ego before. We saw that ego as his like self-esteem plummeted. His ego also went down, and I think even dating, whatever her name, I can't remember. Daphna, right? Even dating Daphna, and she has a kid and all that. I think there's a sense of like Mr. Nati with his big ego would have been just like, I'm not dealing with that. Like, I can date whoever I want. Everyone is in love with me. And then, he got to a point where he was lower, where he was like, actually, you know what? Maybe this is different. Maybe like I need to actually commit and do the work that's like required for this person. But now suddenly he's Mr. Hotshot again, and it's kind of like, okay, I can date anyone. Like, and I agree. I think Daphne is sort of an inconvenience in certain ways because she's a reminder, and she also like calls him out on stuff.
And
right?
Inconvenience.
Just seeing her around, right? Like it's just sort of like, oh, she gets in the way. She's like a reminder of my shortcomings.
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't like talk about someone as being an inconvenience and getting in the way. It might hurt someone's feelings. But yeah, no, I think I hear what you're saying. I think that maybe what you're trying to say, if I may, is that, he recognizes that the social aspect of working with somebody who you have feelings for that you don't necessarily know how to interact with is distracting and also is difficult on the relationship. And so given that he has not yet figured out what that looks like, it was easier a computer program that would do your davening for you. I know. I also loved that idea. I was like, I could sleep through shacharit. That would be awesome. But it'd be really great to like a fault. It'd be really great. But then also the doctor shouldn't have asked him in such a public way. He shouldn't have, I mean, I know that we're talking about a film here, but like, he shouldn't have been able to see her while he was making this quote recommendation or not about her. I think that was unfair. That does lead to Lashon HaRa. And I think there's a lot playing into this. And we all know from relationships that we've been in, romantic or otherwise, that sometimes you say something so that you get out of it what you want, whether that's distance or closeness. And that's what happened in that case, I think. Is that fair? Was that what you were trying to say?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm going to stick with my word.
No. Don't stick. Those were bad vocabulary words. We're not going to use those. Okay, Renee.
Never mind, because you moved on from the Lashon HaRa piece, so I don't want to go down that.
You can go back.
I was just going to say that it kind of reminded me of when I was learning Mesilat Yesharim and going down that whole slippery slope, and that maybe when she, even though what she said might not have been that big of a deal, that it became a big deal because it would have created a domino kind of effect.
Yeah. I mean, that's what Rabbi Pernick and I were talking about a little bit earlier, that it's not just, do you want to use your example, Rabbi Pernick, since Susan is here?
Sure.
Okay. This is an example that Rabbi Pernick really enjoyed, so.
Yeah. So I said, if, Susan was considering working with Rabbi Schatz, and then I said to Susan, like, hey, you should know that Rabbi Schatz, has a terrible temper and throws things. Right? Like I said something about like
the example has become a little bit more embellished.
I know. And we were talking about, okay, so what? There's so many different pieces to that. There's the piece of, do I know? Does Susan know me? Right? Is Susan going to be like, who are you, and what are you like? Why are you trying? Like, what are you trying to do here? Why are you trying to stop me from working with her? There's another piece of, for me, who's the one saying that, is the, do I think Susan's gonna, do we have a strong enough relationship that she would say, oh, okay, you say I shouldn't work with her, so I'm not going to work with her? Or is this something that she's going to still follow through and work with her, with Rabbi Schatz, but then at some point when Rabbi Schatz has a temper tantrum and starts throwing things, she's like, oh, Rabbi Pernick said that, warned me about this side of you, right? And so in that case now, what I said is sort of being passed on and is now being used as sort of ammo in a fight. So right, so all of those pieces we were talking about, and actually I think I was thinking about this in light of when Nati is asked about Daphna, and of who are you asking, and does Nati as the resident actually have input in this decision? That to me was a little strange, what they and if, what advantage is it for them to ask him what he thinks about this person? Is his input actually going to be does it weigh in? I like your shots as a response. Okay. So I think it requires knowing who you're talking to, how it's going to be heard, what that person's going to do with that information. Are they going to keep it to themselves, or are they going to pass it along? Is it self-serving? Am I saying, all these bad things about Rabbi Schatz because I want Susan to work with me, right? There's all these pieces that you have to sort of know the players, and you have to know the situation. And that's why the Chafetz Chaim talks about the importance of actually reflect, thinking about what are the ramifications and what are the purposes. What are you trying to get out of it? If it's purely to stop a harmful situation, that's okay. But if there's ulterior motives, then it's a problem. Yeah.
So that was clearly not a real example, except for that Susan does work for me, with me, for me, both. But it is something that when you're talking about other people, this goes back to what I said earlier about it doesn't have to just be a negative thing, that Josh could have said really lovely things about me, which would be more realistic, and could have somehow made that into something that, even if it was really lovely things about me, that it would make Susan not want to work with me. That is still Lashon Hara. Even if Josh is glowing about how lovely of a person I am, if he's making it sound like those are still qualities that Susan wouldn't want to work with or be around, then all of a sudden now this is Lashon Hara, because maybe Josh thinks that either Susan will come and work with him, or somehow I won't get the benefit of working with anybody, whatever it is. That is still Lashon Hara, even if the speech itself is positive. So I just wanted to give that spin on it. The intention is extremely important in the speech itself.
Yeah. Right, both intention and sort of the relationship piece, I think, also. That, like, there's someone, and again, this comes to the question about the supervisor asking Nati. Like, I think, right, even asking, like, if Nati's opinion is not going to be part of the calculus, like, if they are asking all of the doctors on the unit, including the residents, and they actually are going to, based on the, sort of come to a decision based on that cumulative input, fine. But if, I don't know, like, to me, it seemed like, are you really going to ask the residents about the benefit to patients of the medical clown? Like, that seems strange. And if you're not going to utilize his input, then what's your purpose in asking him?
Well, and especially because probably why he was being asked was because this person had noticed that he had spent more time with her. Whether or not she knew about their dating, who knows? But it's unfair. This would be a real life example, right? It would be unfair if someone was on this call right now who was trying to get Rabbi Pernick to work for them as their rabbi in their community, and was on this call as, just an observer and a student. The fact that they see that I know Rabbi Pernick well, coming to me to ask me those questions, is either an advantage or a disadvantage, depending on how I feel about Rabbi Pernick in the moment. But that closeness, right, is something that the person is aware of, and therefore is pulling that relationship, as Rabbi Pernick mentioned before, is pulling from a sense of, oh, you must know this person well enough to give me an answer one way or the other. And I think that's what was happening with Nati, right? They didn't just go to someone random in the hospital. They specifically went to a person who has spent a lot of time with her. Again, not knowing the background, but seeing that they had spent a lot of time together and probably knew each other very well.
Though I don't know that means that he knows how much patients benefit from her work.
No. I'm not saying that it does. I'm just saying the relationship, right? That the person who asked the question knew that there was a relationship there, and expected that would give a different kind of response.
Right. Oh, I think she's helped the unit tremendously, and she's even made the doctors feel better. Whatever. You're right.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Norm.
I think it seemed pretty clear that she was doing a broad, survey of all the physicians that had worked with her, and she later said, that which way you went wouldn't actually have made a difference because it was a consensus. So I think it goes no farther.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't remember that.
Yeah.
Renee.
Does lying ever fall under Lashon Hara if it impacts another person? Like when he lied to that clinic about coming in, saying she couldn't come in, when obviously she did it because she has some issues with Amir, and it was a conscious decision not to go because now she'd have to wait a whole other month before she considers doing it. Does that tie in anywhere with Lashon Hara ever?
That's a different category of speech, but that wouldn't be Lashon Hara because she's not speaking about anybody except for herself. She's just lying. And even lying in halakha or just Jewish tradition in general has different types of categories. So if you're lying for a certain reason, that's one category. If you're lying for another, it's another. But it's not Lashon Hara in the way that it was done, at least in that example.
Right. Midvar sheker hirchak. Distance yourself from a lie, from words of lying. So yeah, it's a different category of things, but also a problematic, things that you can't do. You're right. I think, here again, we've touched on a number of different types, none of which are like straight up, right? So for one thing, there's all the people commenting about Nazi on the site. So like those things are true. And like I think that's a question about Lashon Hara also, right? All these people commenting on the article and saying, Nazi has a massive ego, he's the biggest jerk I ever dated. So like, I mean, that might be true. It's a negative thing, but possibly someone reading this article and being like, ooh, this Nazi guy seems cool, will now see these comments and be like, actually, I'm not gonna pass. So I don't know. What do people think? Does that fall under permissible? Again, if it's true, let's assume it's true that these are people who actually dated Nazi, and they did find him to be the biggest jerk that they ever dated. Do you think to put it out publicly, not when being asked for their opinion, but just publicly for everyone to see, no, he's the biggest jerk I ever dated. Stay far away. Like.
They also could be getting back at him because he didn't pursue them or have any more interest in them. So it could have been with a negative reason that they made those comments.
Yeah, certainly. Right. He never called me back. He didn't take down my phone number.
It's interesting. Debbie and Steve wrote that it is Lashon Hara. It's an interesting category of Lashon Hara because, of course, it is now getting people to speak ill of, in this case, Nazi, or to at least think bad things about him that they might not otherwise even know. And at the same time, if I were a person looking at that website to see if I wanted to date Israel's most eligible doctor or whatever. Fourth, excuse me. Well, if I can't have the first, might as well the fourth. That could be helpful, right? So in the category of, is it Lashon Hara, like begadol, like as an umbrella category? Sure. Is it also helpful? Yeah, probably if it's honest. So that's also where, right. Yeah. The idea of rate my professor is exactly the same thing, right? Where you're opening up these floodgates to hearing people's opinions, whether they're good or they're bad. And are all of those comments Lashon Hara, just the negative ones? Like halacha would say that all of them are, because you're talking about the person and you're sharing words about them in a way that they that will be out in the world for people to hear and comment and judge.
Right. So I guess before we get to Debbie and Steve, I think it's interesting to think about these three different things that Rabbi Barber brings, Yori brings, and then Nazi, right? So one is about a product, right? A company, you want to buy a product and you want to see what are the reviews on this product. Another is something is like Rate My Professor, where it's something that professors going into the field, like if a company is advertising a product online, they know there's going to be reviews. Right? Often they need there to be reviews on the product. Rate My Professor, at least when it first came up, was a little bit like professors were like, wait, I don't like this. Like I didn't know people are going to be evaluating my job performance publicly. But at the same time, now it's sort of a known deal that, okay, if you're going to be a professor at a university, you know that there are these sites where, your performance is evaluated by students, not by, superiors. And that means that someone could, you could have given someone a deservingly bad grade and they could just trash you. Nazi is different in that Nazi didn't ask for this, right? Nazi didn't ask to be put on this website. And this comes to that last category that we had spoken about earlier of excessively praising someone that then causes other people to be like, well, there's this negative thing about him, right? So if you speak just glowingly positively about someone, people are going to be like, well, I saw him do this. Well, right? They're going to find the flaws. And that's sort of what we see with Nazi, that Nazi is just going about his business, doesn't know what's going on. Suddenly this website is talking about how he's a movie star, good looks, and blah, blah, blah. And now all these other people are like, yeah, but he has a massive ego. So I think it's even worth thinking about, like, is this site that posts these most eligible bachelor things, right, is what they're doing Lashon Hara, even though it's all good things, because those good things are leading to for people to then comment bad things.
Yes.
Yes. Raishat says yes. She says, never talk about anybody.
So just what you just said right here, that's exactly what I was going to talk about, is, listening to Lashon HaRa tonight and kind of this standard that's being set up. As good human beings, we're supposed to be concerned about, aware of, attentive to the people in our lives. But the standard set up by Lashon HaRa is we may not talk about them. Isn't there kind of a conflict there? I mean, these are people in our lives, and we're supposed to be, connected with them and concerned about them. But gosh, we can't talk about them at all, ever. What do you think?
Rabbi Pernick?
Right. And I think that's the challenge, that we do talk about them, right? Like, we all talk about other people. That's part of, like, imagine a conversation with someone where you're not talking about anyone else who you know in common, just in passing. Like, it would be really hard to do. It
wouldn't be really hard. Everyone would just talk less.
People would talk a lot less. Yes.
Or not at all.
It would, yeah. So, like, it's an interesting standard to try to uphold, but you're right. It would totally change the nature of, and often those things, right? It helps us know what's going on in people's lives, and like, flesh out people's characters, because we've only met them briefly and so forth. So, yeah, like, I agree with you. I think that's why, as much as the Chafetz Chaim has these standards of what's okay and what's not okay and how you have to reflect on it, like, I don't know. I think it's very rare that people actually live by those, or even try to. It's just so hard to do that. And I wonder what the net effects of actually following the Chafetz Chaim to a T would be, in terms of, like, the way people talk. I guess they'll just talk about, Torah. Like,
well, I think so. The most famous application of Lashon HaRa is when we talk about Sara'at, and that all comes from the rabbis wanting to understand where could this possibly come from? Why would you have it? What is it? We don't really know. And one of the things that is so interesting about Sara'at is that it is not just on you, but it affects everything around you. And I think that's where this Lashon HaRa piece that you're bringing up, Steve, comes into play, because we are not going to all go around not talking about people, right? We could do a better job not talking negatively about people or gossiping about people, but we're not going to go around, for all the reasons that you explained and that Rabbi Pernick was just mentioning. It just doesn't make any sense as humans to not be able to ask about somebody or share information about somebody, especially if it's to the benefit of the other person who you're speaking to. And just like Sara'at, you need to be aware of how your words are going to affect just beyond your own body and affect the person you're speaking to, your household, the way that you present yourself out into the world. So I obviously just gave a drash. None of that is fact, and none of that is halacha, but it is clear to me that the reason that the rabbis make that connection is because that is what our words do. And especially in the kind of sense that Rabbi Pernick is talking about, that you open up this most eligible bachelor, and, the person who chose him might think he's the most eligible bachelor, but all those women didn't think so. And so they shared their opinions. And now that has opened these floodgates of Lashon HaRa. So I think that it's important for us to remember that we are all going to engage in categories of Lashon HaRa in basically every conversation we have. It's just a matter of, is it negative, or is it just Lashon HaRa because it is something that could affect a person, and we should choose to make that be positive.
I think Leonard was up next.
Okay, so can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. So what if you know somebody who just isn't a very nice, good person? He cheats people, he steals things, whatever. don't you have an obligation to warn somebody about this person?
Yes, you do. And again, I think this is in the category of, would that be under the umbrella of Lashon HaRa? Yeah. But are you doing it for the benefit of the other person who needs to know to not engage in that, relationship, or to buy something from that person, or is it going to be helpful? Yes, of course. So that kind of outweighs the category of it being Lashon HaRa.
Right.
Thank you, Rabbi Pernick, for saying right, because now you know that that was correct.
Yeah. So right, you have the ability and perhaps even the obligation to share truthfully if there's something negative. Right.
But it still is Lashon HaRa.
It is still negative speech about someone, but it's acceptable Lashon HaRa. Correct. Yeah. Right.
No.
In the civil law, I believe that one of the exceptions to defamation is when somebody asks you a question with the expectation that you will be frank with them. And it seems to me that when the head of the department asks Nati, do you think we need this position? She's expecting an honest evaluation, and he gives her what he considers to be an honest evaluation. Probably both times, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like maybe there ought to be an exception, or a carving out of a rule about Lashon HaRa that would be similar.
Yeah.
It sounds like there is actually where you're doing that in order to help somebody. Correct.
Yeah, exactly. Again, I think when we think about these different categories, right, just like this is a very different category, but it's similar in the example that I'm going to give. When we think about things that are tahor or tameh, right, anything that is in the category of tameh is not, it doesn't remain tameh forever, and it doesn't mean that something bad is going to happen if you engage with it, right? So if you think about the idea of nida, right, a woman doesn't remain that way for forever, but is still can still remain in that category, that umbrella category. So the idea of Lashon HaRa being under a category, I'm about to get a phone call, sorry, it's going to be loud. The way that those kinds of statements come under the category of Lashon HaRa does not mean that you shouldn't share them and shouldn't bring them, to the surface. It just means that they live under a certain kind of category that you should be aware of, and kind of navigate accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Rabbi Pernick, for the
nod.
Any other thoughts, comments?
Yeah,
Susan. You have to unmute, Susan. Oh, Sorry.
Okay, yeah, I know, but thank you. So I didn't see the clip that you, or the whatever you guys showed.
Episode.
Thank you, episode. But it does occur to me that each one of us sees the world in the way we see the world, okay? And I can see this human as a horrible human or just not a great guy, okay? But you, Rebecca, or Rabbi Schutz, sees that human as you don't see what I see. Who's more right? And that's the whole, so when someone opens with, oh, she's starting work tomorrow and she's this, and this, well, that may not be who she is, but now do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Okay, help me.
I do know what you're saying. And I think that's exactly, similar to what Norm was saying. I think that goes under this category of, is it going to be Lashon HaRa? Probably. Is it okay to share and maybe even beneficial to share? Yes. So that's where this category of Lashon HaRa has flexibility and allows you to benefit from still engaging in what would be considered Lashon HaRa, but to make sure that we know about people and we know how to engage with them and how to socialize around them. Oh, wait, you're muted again. You're muted. Wait. Go ahead.
But who muted me? Did you mute me?
I did. Okay. It's okay. We're going to keep going. Mm-hmm.
But I may not see it accurately. I am just sharing my opinion, but my opinion could be so desperately wrong.
Yeah.
But in good faith, I'm sharing that opinion because I want to protect you, right? And I'm wrong. I saw it wrong. I read it wrong.
Yeah.
And that's like a double, triple, quadruple awfulness. That's hurtful.
Yeah. I mean, again, to go back to that pillow analogy, right, that with the Hasidic story, that anything you put out into the world with your words could, as we say every morning with Baruch She'amar, like it could create worlds and it could destroy worlds. So it's just based on how accurate that information is and what the person does with that information. So yeah, you could be misreading, or the person could have given off the wrong first impression that you're now kind of basing everything off of. But not to be like super cliche, but like that's the risk we take in being human and engaging socially. I think I don't know a way around it that would keep people from speaking Lashon Hara, but also would keep people in communication with one another. But maybe Rabbi Pernick has something other than yes to say to that.
I don't actually.
Yeah,
no, I think that, right, this episode speaks to like just the complications of like being in relationships of different types, right? Different friends, romantic, professional, all of these relationships have, there's sort of roles that you play. You're asked feedback sort of in different ways. Nitzan sort of asks kind of maybe a little bit, Yifat, for her feelings about this other woman, Miri, I think is her name. The supervisor asked Nati's opinion sort of professionally. So all of these are like situations in which you need to share information about another person, whether to a friend, to a colleague, to a, potential romantic partner, whatever, that like it's complicated of how are you doing it for the well-being generally of people, or is it coming from a place of jealousy? Is it coming from a place of like, I want that position? There's so many different pieces there that we all, I think, deal with even subconsciously all the time. Yeah, Jeff.
Well, speaking from a number of years of experience, when one reviews faculty for promotions or hiring, or for that matter, student evaluations of faculty members, one thing you have to do as a committee member is weed out, comments, whether they're really comments on professional things or just personal statements. And that's always tough to do because a lot of personal statements can really shade your opinion, but then you have to look at, to decide whether these are just people don't like a person or they're really criticizing their work, their actual work. And that's tough, but it certainly can shade the committee if they get enough, negative comments.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one of the things that I brought up, I think you were there, so I'm sorry for repeating myself, but one of the things I brought up before you all watched the episode was that in the conservative movement, there's actually a tshuva on writing letters of recommendation, because for exactly that reason of potentially putting words that will live, forever on a page about a person, you have to know, am I supposed to say glowing things because that would be how we would want a person to be known in the world? Or do I say honest things that might not be as glowing if the person asks me for a recommendation? So what you are bringing up, it also made me think about, I don't know if this happened with Rabbi Pernick, but when I interviewed, auditioned, I guess a little bit of auditioning, to be the rabbi at Temple Beth Am, there were other candidates. And one of the things that they asked at the end of each weekend was for people to fill out a survey that they said whether or not they liked us, what we did well. I never saw those, obviously, but there are stacks of papers in, the head of the search committee's office, that say what people enjoyed and didn't enjoy about all these different candidates. And that is both helpful and also, yes, the category of Lashon Hara, because I'm sure there were not all glowing things about any of the three of us. You're smiling. You have something to say, right, Pernick?
No, I was thinking about that. I mean, even when synagogues go through, like our synagogue is sort of doing a minor strategic planning thing. But then like the report comes back, right? So like if you have a focus group within the synagogue, but then like it gets reported back to the leadership. And if it's like, oh, it's the same people who take on leadership and everything, or like, oh, it would be better if the rabbi did this. And then it comes back and you don't know, like it just, right? There's all these things of like, okay, so now, do the people who are saying these things know who's going to end up hearing it? Do they think it's staying in a certain room? Do they recognize in saying this that it's going to other people, including those who they might be saying something that could be heard negatively, are going to hear this thing and so forth. Like but at the same time, you want people to share honestly what their opinions are. So it's just complicated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, Leonard, last comment.
Last comment. All right, better be a good one.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the chat over here, and Debbie and Steve wrote that if those negative things are said, the person has no chance to start over and restart because people have prejudged. And that reminded me of a business trip I had once to Bermuda. And I took a taxi from the airport to my hotel. And the taxi driver happened to also be, I think he was the chief of police in well, maybe not all of Bermuda, but wherever I was. And, we were talking on the way over there. One of the things he said, is that it's a small place. Most people know a lot of the other people were around. And if you're known as one of the bad guys, as a thief or whatever, you basically have no chance at all in Bermuda because nobody will hire you. Nobody will give you a chance and the only way you can make a living is being a crook. And he said it's a real problem that the crooks have no options.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a problem even in America, right? When someone has a rap sheet, it's hard to start over. It's hard to get a job.
It's a bigger town here.
Yeah, right. And some for good reason, right? But it also does taint your general persona, right? People know you now as a certain kind of person, and then it's harder to work your way out of that because it takes a lot of work for people to see you as someone who has changed. But in Judaism, the idea of tshuva is just that, right? I remember, I won't go into details, but in high school, there was a little bit of a scandal with some students in my high school, and they were suspended from school, or expelled, I don't remember, from school, but they were told that they had to do tshuva to be able to return the next year. And there were steps that they had to do both, through the actual Jewish tradition, but also just in order for there to feel like there was healing. But the students knew that there was something that they would always walk around with that painted them as a certain kind of in this case, it wasn't felon, but, in a certain kind of way that people would then judge them. Did you want to say something about Pernick? You look like you
I was going to say, I've been thinking about schools particularly. Like I went to a public school, but it was a fairly small school. It was 100-something kids per grade. But you think even more so at small, like Jewish day schools that go K through 12. Like, you can't ever live down the things that you did when you were in first grade. Like in some cases, I remember there was a girl in my middle school who ended up transferring because she accidentally walked into the boys' bathroom in like fifth grade. And like 2 years later, she transferred because she felt like, not that people commented all the time, but she felt like she remembers that feeling of embarrassment. And then when she saw people, she thought they were thinking about her as the person who walked into the boys' bathroom and like ended up transferring or dropping out, whatever. Like, and it's so hard because of that idea of like you're around these people. You can't, like, it's a little bit different in our situation in like Srugim and Katamon, where it's like a big enough pool so you can find people who don't know you or don't know these things about you. But especially like just thinking about the ramifications of, right, if everyone is reading this website, everyone is seeing people write Nati's a jerk, Nati, right? Like, so all these people who haven't met Nati yet and haven't yet experienced firsthand how jerky he is, like now it's all out there in public eye for everyone. So, which for better or for worse, but often it's for worse. So I know Rabbi Shat has to go, but yeah, that's a lot of different variations and levels, I guess, of Lashon HaRa. What? They're Lashon HaRa. Yeah.
I just want to say thank you all for being here. It was really lovely to be with you. And also, it doesn't go, at least to me, unnoticed that we got to talk about an Israeli TV show at a time when things in Israel are not positive. And so really lovely to be able to speak about something that, albeit not real, allowed us to bring a little bit of joy into the narrative of Israel today. So thanks for being here. Thanks for engaging in the conversation. And we will see you next week.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.